What is up, everyone, and welcome to the Occult Rejects. Unfortunately, this will be the last episode to the Tarot series. I know for some people they're probably like, "Oh, thank God, it's finally over." Not in a bad way, but it's very unfortunate to be finally ending it. But I'm sure in the future I'll be getting a chance to work with these two amazing individuals again. But like I said, this is the finale of the Tarot series. To all the people that have listened through all of them, that is what's up. Thank you very much. And to all the people who just happened to check out a few of them, 10 minutes. Thank you. That's what's up as well. But I know it was a lengthy series, but I didn't want to make the episodes way too long and making, whatever. 4 episodes, that would have been like 3 hours a piece. No way. So thought doing it that way was okay. Yeah. Let me just have you both. I'm sure people already know who you are. This is the first episode you're coming across. You have another 6 to listen to, but I'll let you guys plug yourselves just in case nobody's heard of you before. Like, again, I find that hard to believe, but Megan, let everybody know what's up with you, the stuff you got brewing.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am a practicing occultist. I am a professional tarot reader, paranormal investigator. I teach a number of occult subject classes, and I read at 2 local shops in my area. If you guys want to follow me or want to book any services with me, you can get a hold of me. My main is Instagram, so that's the number 7 degrees of wisdom on Instagram, the same on Facebook. Everything is linked. So I have a link tree on my Instagram page if you guys want to check that. I'm sure Nick's going to put links down in the video below if you guys are interested in anything that I offer.
Definitely. Is that link tree fairly new?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say that I don't have. So I'll grab that after the show and I'll add it to the links.
Okay.
Awesome. Good stuff on the link tree. That's great. And we got Mario. Mario, what is up, man? Let everybody know where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, right on. You guys can find me at symbolicstudies.com. That's probably the easiest thing to do. I have a Patreon, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all that kind of stuff. I'm also a tarot reader, so if people are interested in getting a reading, they can reach out through my website, or you can send me a DM. And generally what I do for my content is I put out information, I put out short videos about the sign that we're currently in under the tropical system. So right now I'm putting out a bunch of stuff about Virgo. And so if you're interested in following the signs that way, definitely give me a follow.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I should have his stuff in the bottom as well. And just to let people know that might be, watching this live or catching it before next week, I will have Mario and his girl on next week as well to talk about the Process Church. Very much looking forward to that. So, promoting
Same.
that now. Yeah. I think that's going to be fun. It's a very interesting topic. So I look forward to that. And I thank you both for coming back to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be a good time.
But I guess we'll get into it. We have 3 cards left, and I will be, as usual, how I've been doing it the last 6 episodes. I will start off with the Toth deck. We'll have Mario, give his description, and me and Megan will have something to say about it, and then we'll go on to the writer and do the same.
Sure.
Here we go. Here is the Sun from the Toth deck.
Nice. So the Thoth deck is interesting, right? Because it has different interpretations of the traditional sort of layouts that are usually associated with the cards. But when you study the tarot enough, you'll realize that there's actually a lot of things that are still kind of intact here that a lot of classic cards have. As an example, in the Marseille sort of decks, what you're going to see generally are 2 children holding hands, and they're in front of a brick wall. Here you see the 2 children. They're much smaller, right? Usually they take up way more of the canvas space. And then there isn't so much a very obvious wall, but there's that little band, which is a symbolic wall, essentially, around that green mound. And for a long time, I was like, how does this wall, and we'll see in the Rider-Waite version, there's a much larger wall, right? But how does this wall relate to the sun? How does it relate to 2 children? Oftentimes the children look like they're twins or siblings. And it actually has a lot to do with Gemini symbolism of all things, but it makes a lot of sense once you understand how to decode it. And my understanding essentially is that in ancient Babylon, there was a period of time called the brick mold. And so this was during Gemini season. And this is when they would commence building projects after the rainy season because the sun was now out. And so you can actually build buildings and all of these different types of things using bricks. And you could also construct walls and things like that. The reason why they called it the brick mold is because they were using the heat of the sun to actually bake bricks outside. And so if it's the rainy season, they obviously couldn't do that because it was too much moisture in the air. And so the bricks would not bake. And so during Gemini season, during the season of the twins, is when all of this stuff would start happening. And it's really interesting. I probably got into it a little bit, I'm assuming, during the episode when we talked about the Lover's card. But these twins being associated with bricks, it's very, very interesting because there's a number of hero twin myths where basically these twins are credited for being the founders of a town or of a city or a village or whatever. And oftentimes they're credited for building the first wall in that city as well, out of bricks. So Romulus and Remus, the hero twins of Rome, they actually are credited for building the first wall in Rome, right? And so this is actually where we get Rome from. It's from Romulus. And then what ends up generally happening is that the evil twin will kill the good twin. So it's very strange that there's this connection, but there is a tradition linking Gemini with the return of the sun, and then also this season with bricks, brick making and whatever. So there's actually a lot of illustrations that you can look up if you want of Romulus and Remus constructing this brick wall, and then also too one of them being killed at this brick wall as well. So this is a slight nod to that. He really kind of he reduces, I guess, that impact and that mythology a little bit because he doesn't make it a prime focus like a lot of older decks, but it's still here nonetheless. And so what you see here are these twins, kind of like Gemini twins, as I've been saying. You have this brilliant sun. This sun has 12 rays, and in between each ray, you see all of the zodiac signs, right? The signs of the ecliptic. And so the zodiac wheel, the constellations that are on that band, they are there and they are acknowledged as such because of the rotation of the sun. So this is the path of the sun that we're talking about. It's also kind of interesting that he puts two smaller rays in between the larger rays, and what he's doing is he's kind of indicating the decans of every single sign as well, right? So there's 30 degrees per sign, and so 10 degrees would be a decan. So he's almost acknowledging the 3 decans, right, of every single sign as well. But the alternative title for this card is Lord of the Fire of the World. And what this card has a lot to do with is the Lord or Sun. So Sun, S-O-N/S-U-N, right? So it's not uncommon for a lot of Sun cards not to have twins, but to actually have just a young child, a young son. And so he's been referred to as like the Lord of Light, the Lord of Light and Liberty, and things like this, which is very interesting too, because all of those words, L-I, right? Light, liberty, life. And then also too, I even think of like lion, right? As in Leo, as in the sign that's ruled by the sun. And so generally, most cultures see the sun as a more masculine sort of presence, right? It's projective, the rays of the sun, they expand out. There are some cultures that see the sun as being feminine. I tend to default kind of towards the masculine side of things. And so men generally, were more outward. Women generally tend to be a little more intuitive and passive, if you want to put it that way. So there's more of an inner sort of thing going on with the divine feminine, I would say. And all you have to do too, I've said this multiple times, many times before, but, just looking at the sexual organs of man and women, the internal versus the external. So there's a lot of external projective sort of energy going on here, expansive, right? So the two little coins at the bottom, what they look like to me are kind of like little coins, but what they actually are, it's an indication of the rose and the cross symbolism, kind of like what the Rosicrucians like to use. And even it's the symbolism of what's on the back of this deck here, right? So you see the rosy cross. Yeah, exactly. So those coins are actually symbolic of this rosy cross sort of symbolism. But this sun card comes after the moon and also comes after the star. So what I've said is that the star card to me is emblematic of the North Star. The moon is obviously our moon, and then the sun is actually our sun. But I think that there's kind of an indication here that we're talking about symbolic ages as well. The stellar age with the star card, perhaps the lunar age with the moon card, and then today, in today's world, I think we very much live in like a solar sort of paradigm, a solar age, a solar tradition, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I think that's kind of encoded here. Also, just the green mound too. You know, mound symbolism, mountain symbolism. It really has a lot to do with ascension because you climb a mountain, you're closer to the heavens, you feel as though you're closer to God. The fact that it's a green mound too, it just implies fertility. It implies life. And the life-giving sort of aspect of the sun, obviously. Where would we be without the sun? I just went through a fairly long winter with where I'm at, and I was really, really missing the sun. And once it came back, I honestly, my vitality came back. You know, as I started just like baking out in the sun and just like sweating more and everything else, I just feel like, I don't know, I felt like myself again, actually. And so we owe a lot to the sun, clearly. And then the Hebrew letter that's associated with this card is Resh, which means head. And this kind of relates to the projective nature of our head as well. And so even you think of the ram, you think of Aries, the headstrong nature of the ram, you think of his horns. And so everything implies that the head is really like at the forefront of the symbolism of that creature, right? And so for us, it's like we come into this reality head first, right? You crown. Most of us do, at least. Obviously, there's some people who are born, you know, backwards or whatever. But the vast majority of us, yeah, we come into this reality head first. And I would say symbolically, our head has a lot to do with a projective sort of energy versus, say, a receptive sort of energy. And so Resh corresponds with this card. But yeah, that's what I have off the top of my head. But I would say, let me just look at my notes real quick. Potential and optimism. I think we're going to see that a little bit more in the Rider-Waite version because you're seeing, again, a child. And so for some reason, these two children, to me, they kind of get lost a little bit. I kind of like the emphasis of the larger children, or I like the emphasis of the child on a horse, which we'll see here in a bit. But it all kind of goes back to this idea of potential. And so when you see a young child, you know, you just see a bright future ahead of them, or a potential bright future ahead of them, right? They have their whole entire life ahead of them. So there's a lot of potential when you look at any kind of young person, right? And so the older somebody gets, the less you see, you know, all of those different types of qualities. And so there's like a youthfulness and an innocence, right, that comes with this card as well, for sure. But yeah, that's what I have right now. So I'm going to continue looking at my notes and see if there's anything else relevant that I should bring up. But what do you guys think about this card?
You go ahead, Megan.
So when you mentioned the deacons, I thought that was pretty cool. When you get into the higher, later rituals, when you're practicing ceremonial magic, you invoke the deacons with the correspondences of the angels and all that. So that's probably what he was getting at here with this card, and especially with the zodiac sign, because this one ritual, it takes hours to complete. And because you're invoking all the deacons, all the zodiac signs, all the correspondences all at once. And so I think that's why he added all the zodiac signs around the end. And then you talked about the rose at the bottom there. And then the one coming out of the sun itself is indicative of kind of becoming one, and, you know, having two combined into one and becoming one with, you know, your physical body and your spiritual self. So that's what I see when I look here at this card.
Nice.
Could you real quick, if you don't mind, if you want to try to do it like in the basic sense? I know this would probably be something better to talk about going into zodiac, but would you mind explaining like the 3 different parts of the zodiac, kind of? You know how you have like the God, I forgot the proper names of them. The one
like
all right,
cardinal, fixed, and mutable.
yes, yeah. Would you be
Yeah.
able to explain that real quick, Megan? You think?
So
I mean, I know
there's
it's not that easy and that.
no, I just got done teaching a class in a intro to astrology, and this was in here. So let me grab something really quick, and I will go over that just real quick.
Yeah, I'll fill the air for a second. So cardinal, definitely more of a raw sort of energy, more straightforward.
Like
Fixed is definitely more balanced, and then mutable, it means liable to change. So that's where you're going to see the mutable is going to be the last sign of the season, right? Preparing for the next sign that's going to be cardinal in nature.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's pretty much what I was.
Okay, so cardinal signs. They start a new season. Those Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And then you have the fixed signs, which is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And these are also the fixed signs of 4 royal stars that you invoke in that ritual I was explaining. So fixed signs carry the weight of each season, and it gives them like a sturdy quality. Mutable signs, they follow the conclusion of each season. So that's Gemini, Virgo, Sag, and Pisces.
I think between what you and Mario just said, that's actually good enough right there.
You know, it's a really sort of helpful visual, I personally think, for the nature of cardinal signs, the nature of fixed signs, and the nature of mutable signs is actually the Wheel of Fortune card. And so you'll notice that on the Wheel of Fortune card, there's 3 creatures around the wheel. One is going up, one is at the very top, and then another one is going down the wheel. To me, symbolically, cardinal would be the creature that's going up. The fixed signs would be the Sphinx on top of the wheel, and then the mutable sign would be the one going down. And so it's kind of symbolic of the season kind of coming in, right? And then having this equilibrium with the middle sign, and then kind of waning and changing for the next season to come in.
Yeah.
Very well.
Sorry for that pause there. I just didn't want to butcher it, and I have it like in something that I use in my readings every time I read. So I wanted to be correct on it.
Well, yeah, no, you're all good. The last thing I'll say real quick is just notice that the children, I do like the detail of their arms being open like that. It's receiving the rays of the sun.
Yes.
So again, it kind of goes back to the projective nature of the rays and of the sun itself, right? And so therefore, when we are hit by the rays, we are being the receptive end, right? And so they're showing that receptivity with them just kind of embracing the rays coming to them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. There we
Okay. You guys want me to start with this one?
go for it.
Yes, please.
Okay. So like Mario said before, the secret esoteric name of this card is the Lord of the Fire of the Worlds. This card is exalted in Aries. It's the element of fire, represents the 5th house of creativity. So generally when this pops up in a reading, it's harmony, joy, purpose, spiritual awareness, new day dawning, solar energy infusion, and initiation. So this card represents the feeling that you get when you become fully integrated, when you're in your practice. So it's the direct source of enlightenment. It represents the subconscious coming into consciousness. It's all about regeneration, renewal, a role to play, and it also represents our ego. It also has correspondences to Ra and Apollo. And this card, since it's 19, so 1 + 9 is 10, which would give you the Magician card. So this is the result that you would get after embodying the Magician card and shaping your reality around you. Once you've succeeded, the Sun card would be what you would feel. This card is about victory and success, and it's the beginning of the last 3 stages of alchemy. So it's the stage of distillation. It's a gaseous state. It cools and then recondenses. It's about receiving spiritual illumination and awakening. The sun rays represent cosmic gradient light. The wavy rays represent vibration coming down from the heavens. The face represents a living, intelligent consciousness that's on the sun there. The feather represents the feather of Ma'at, similar to the Justice card, purity and truth. The red flag represents the victory, an active masculine element to this card. The white horse represents the divine self, and it also kind of correlates to the death card as well. The brick wall represents truth that is partially revealed and partially obscured because of the five senses. The sunflower represents the natural kingdom of mineral, vegetable, animal, and human, and the four elements combined together. And then I wrote down, only as a child should you enter the kingdom of heaven, and it creates a sense of wonder. And that's what I've got for the sun card.
Nice. Yeah, a few things come to mind. One of them is that when you look at the glyph for the sun, it's a circle with a dot in it. And I think you can kind of make the parallel, perhaps, that, you know, even when you look at this card, it's like the wall would be the circle around that dot, you know? And so there's like a tempering sort of nature going on where it's like definitely projective and expansive, you know, but there is some sort of quality that kind of keeps it restricted, which is like a Saturnian sort of thing. And I've probably said it on this show before. Yeah. That some people have said this is more of like something from the electric universe side of things, but that Saturn was once the old sun. And so that's kind of interesting. And even when you look at Saturn from a top-down perspective, you see the ring and then you see that dot in the middle, which would be the planet. So there's this kind of interesting relationship actually between Saturn and the sun, and that wall is definitely, I would say, a Saturnian thing. Saturn is all about boundaries and restrictions and things like that. The other thing that comes to mind is the fact that, you know, if you look into Gnosticism, you're going to be talking quite a bit, or you're going to be looking into the demiurge, right? So the demiurge is the child of Sophia. The demiurge has the head of a lion and the body of a serpent or a worm. And so I see a lot of parallels between feline symbolism, the serpent, and even dragons as well. But the demiurge is very, very fiery. He's very much emblematic of the sun. So he is the son to the great mother, to Sophia, you know, the queen of heaven, if you want to call her that. And to me, this child is kind of symbolic of this demiurgic sort of energy. The first thing when you read the Gnostic Gospels, I believe, one of the things it says is the first thing that the demiurge did was move. And so he was like commanded to move, like move child, something like that. And so here he is on a horse, right? This is more of the masculine sort of nature, is to actually move. And so I would say the feminine nature is actually more so to be throned and to be domestic and to rule from the confines of her castle or kingdom or home, right? Versus the man is more likely going to be traveling. You know, he's going to go out and get the bacon and bring it home. So man's nature, I think, is more in line with this sort of journeying sort of thing. So the fact that this child is on horseback, I think, makes a lot of sense. Also, Crowley had this idea, which we'll talk about with this card, and then also with the Aeon card, it comes up again, with especially with his version. But this idea that God, in a lot of ways, I believe the metaphor, what I've taken away from it, because there's multiple layers to how he presented his information and the Aeons and these different gods and stuff like that. But the way I tend to perceive it is that God can be likened to a crowned and conquering child. And in fact, there's a book that I read about John Dee, and it goes through his whole entire working with the Aethers. And long story short, when he got to the end of this whole entire ritual, which took a very long time to do, very complicated, lots of steps and, you know, whatever, hurdles, he met God, and he realized that God is actually a child. And so, which is not what I expected to be the case, right? So the crowned and conquering child, notice that he's wearing a crown, right, on his head. And once again, Resh corresponds with the head. So I think what you're seeing here for people who are interested in the Crowley side of things is you're seeing the crowned and conquering child.
Which book was that? Are you, excuse me, talking about?
It's called John Dee and the Empire of Angels.
I just got that book and I'm reading it right now.
Oh, nice.
That
Cool.
book is phenomenal. And I
Yeah,
watched
isn't it
I watched an interview with him and Damien Eccles talking about the book, and that guy is phenomenal. He's a magician himself. I didn't realize
Jason
that.
Louv. Yeah.
Yes.
Totally. He's an interesting guy, actually.
Yes,
for
he
a lot of
is.
different reasons, I would say. But that's awesome. Yeah, very cool.
Yep.
Well, spoiler alert. That's what kind of everything builds up to in a way.
Awesome.
But you're still going to get a ton out of it just from reading it. So
cool.
I do find it, I was going to mention it before, and then what you even just said now, Mario, I find it like rather interesting that I was thinking the same thing about a child. Even with Tiferet, if you want to go with the Kabbalah and the sun would be there. Oh, nice.
There's the book.
The sun would be there, and the magical image for Tiferet is a small child. Anyway.
Oh, right.
Now,
gotcha.
like
yes.
that is in the middle pillar with the moon below it, and then if you're just staying on the middle pillar, you got Ketha right above you. Obviously, that's a crown. So you have the crowned child. If you're going by the middle pillar,
yes,
there you go.
That's the images that you'll see.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. And so the other thing too, the demiurge has been referred to as a young child. And so he's tyrannical, he's selfish, he's kind of blind to other people's wants and needs and desires and stuff. And so he's been kind of likened to like a toddler or something like that too. So I think the symbolism in so many different ways, absolutely matches up.
It's like a Atreyu right there on his white horse from the Neverending Story.
I know.
Yeah, right?
I was thinking that too, and I didn't want to say anything.
You should just say it. Yeah.
I know.
No. The other thing I'll say that I think is kind of interesting, because I'm the one who brought up the masculine sun, but there's other cultures who see the feminine sun. One of the things the Rider-Waite does that I kind of just noticed is that to me this face looks more feminine than masculine. And then when you look on the moon card, the face looks more masculine than feminine. And so I think they're kind of creating sort of a hybrid sort of thing going on here. The masculine sun with a feminine face, and then the masculine face of the moon, which is more feminine in nature. And so I've seen this in other works before, where the moon is very clearly a man, the man on the moon, and then the sun is clearly a woman with how they illustrate it. So just thought I would point that out. And
I just realized something before I forget. So the red feather is also in the full card, and he's got one on too.
Totally.
Okay,
totally.
That's another rabbit hole I'm going down next.
And the Fool has this. There's a sun in the corner, and his background is yellow.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of overlap there for sure.
Yeah.
And I do have something here that I want to add that Lisa typed in the chat that I think is probably worth mentioning. Very scientific and weird. On the sunflower, each floret is orientated towards the next by a golden angle, which is a pattern of inconnecting spirals. Number of left spirals and number of right spirals are successive Fibonacci numbers.
The Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah, the golden
mean.
Golden.
Yep, and sacred geometry too. You can throw that in there as well.
And even just thinking of that, and I'm not going to harp on it too much, but again, I don't think this has anything to do with sick stuff with kids. But if you think about exactly what's being shown, you were being shown a child, and technically those sunflowers have spirals in them. Maybe these things are actually occult symbolism prior. You know what I'm saying? People like to automatically just start tossing all that shit under the Pizzagate carpet. But I think a lot of it is actually occult symbolisms that's getting just confused.
Yes. I've seen it happen so many times.
As an example. And not saying that the other thing is any better. I'm just saying, sometimes when you think you're figuring stuff out, you might be off because it's actually occult symbolism saying something else.
Yeah.
So the other thing too is I just think it's interesting now that I'm kind of revisiting this card is that the sunflowers are just behind the wall, right? And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's a couple of plants that are referred to as like the shield flower. And I believe the sunflower in some cultures has been referred to as such. And if you're around sunflowers, they're huge, right? We have some in our front yard. It's interesting too because they will follow like the path of the sun as well.
Yes.
Right. And so their sun nature is it's like just very obvious and on display or whatever.
Now
but
they'll
the
actually
shield,
turn.
Yes, yeah,
They will
exactly.
actually turn.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, exactly. But the sunflower too, it almost kind of shields you if you have enough of them, from onlookers or whatever. It kind of gives you a little bit of privacy. And so it's just kind of interesting that I'm kind of now noticing that just the wall of sunflowers right by that wall. And so the shielding sort of symbolism or there's a hidden nature kind of going on here. And this is really fascinating too, because the sun also, there's a deep esoteric encode that always links the sun to either darkness or the black sun as well. So every proposition contains its opposite. So if you see a heavily masculine card, you have to think like, what's the feminine side of everything? And so the feminine side of things tends to be more mysterious, more hidden, right? More passive, things like that. And so I think that they're kind of alluding to that here with that wall as well, that Saturnian sort of thing. And so while the sun is very much kind of in your face, hard to ignore, the sun wants everybody's attention, right? It wants all of the shine. It wants all of the glory. And it kind of deserves it in a lot of ways. But they're alluding to the other side of it, of like kind of like the darkness or the hidden aspect of the sun as well, which I tend to think of the black sun personally. But I think that's kind of just a curious thing that they have going on there.
Yeah,
now
one
that
more.
I'm noticing.
Yeah, that is cool. And one thing I wanted to say too is there's only one sign that the sun rules, and that's Leo. Just like
Yes.
Cancer, the only sign that rules it is the moon. And then all the other signs have the rest of the planets that rule it. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, totally. It is.
Something that popped into my head, totally random, but it goes with the sunflowers in a spiral. I had covered a long time ago. One of the first things I did on the NY Patriot thing. I don't even think it was a podcast. I think it was just a video on BitChute. I covered a bunch of 80s and 90s bands that I thought had questionable pedo or occult symbolism in it. And the B-52s was one of them that I covered. And Love Shack. That, first off, that album that's on it is all their videos like peppered with occult symbolism. It's kind of like obvious, actually. It's so wild. But in Love Shack, at one point they show some guy standing there, and it shows like sunflowers reflecting in his glasses, which I thought was like a way of saying like the sun in their eyes, and which is right here on this card. And then it quickly goes to the back of a pig and showing its spiral tail. Just like the sunflowers with the Fibonacci.
Well,
Yeah.
I have to
Weird thinking of it. It just popped into my head.
don't shoot the messenger here. You brought it up, so you started it. But there is an aspect to sun symbolism if you're going to look at it from kind of like a black magical pedo perspective or whatever, where the sun actually relates to the anus, where the sun don't shine. And so this has been a thing that people there's many connections. I don't know if this is the place to kind of like unpack it all or whatever, but that is absolutely a thing that I've come across multiple times, in my research and everything else. So just food for thought for now.
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting, especially with the name of the song and whatever,
Yeah, exactly.
And here we go. The Aeon.
Interesting. So the Aeon card, I'll say the last two cards in the Thoth deck are so dense that we're really just going to be scratching the surface here. Because as I was saying, that there's a whole, cosmological, philosophical sort of thing that Crowley is all about with his aeons and ages and gods and everything else. So just kind of want to throw that out there first and foremost, that like you can really get deep into the Book of the Law and you can get deep into his other stuff, and you'll find a lot more sort of symbolic threads here in this card. And this is a huge departure too from the traditional Judgment card. And I would say personally, I think I kind of prefer, with the Sun card and this card, I think I kind of prefer the Rider-Waite versions. You know, they're a little more straightforward, and I don't know, I just like the classic symbolism. But he definitely did his own thing here. And so the Aeon card, so like I said, under other decks, what they would refer to it as would be the Judgment card. Generally, with that card, which we'll see here in a moment, right? There's an angel up top, he's blowing this horn, and then there's people kind of rising from their tombs, you know, down below. So there's an as above, so below kind of thing going on here, right? As within, so without. So it's almost like the two sides of this polarity kind of merging together and fusing together. And he's kind of showing that in a few ways with this card. You'll notice that there's this large child, right? Kind of translucent, kind of ghost-like. And what you're seeing here is a young Horus. And then behind him, throned, you're going to see an elder Horus. So you're seeing actually two aspects of the same deity, essentially. And this gets into, if I'm not mistaken, the idea that the new Aeon or the new age is going to be related to Horus. You'll see that there's this big, large blue figure, right, wrapped around the top of the card. This is Nuit. And so this is the Queen of Heaven. Generally, in Egyptian artwork, you're going to see her bending kind of like that, and you're going to see stars within her body, and she's generally blue or darker. And it's interesting because on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, she has these bracelets, and one of the bracelets looks more kind of digital in nature. It's almost like this little, I don't even know what you call it, a timeline or whatever. And it's these little hard blips. And then on the other bracelet, you're going to see this like wave sort of thing. So I almost kind of get the
One of
sense
them
of
looks like stock market, right?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of reminds me of like digital versus analog. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at what like sound waves look like.
I was going to say, I thought all four of them technically could have been sine waves or sound waves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But there's definitely this dual nature, right, between how the ones on the left are illustrated and the ones on the right are illustrated. So once again, kind of talking about this spectrum or this polarity kind of coming together. You'll notice that she also is kind of creating the top of like an ankh. There's like a symbolic ankh going on here. The upper portion of the ankh and then the lower portion of the ankh, which is, to me, you almost have to just use, you know, your imagination a little bit to kind of see it or whatever. But it's there. But what Crowley said is that Nuit is up top, and then Hadit, Hadit, which would be kind of like the complement to Nuit, is actually there in the form of that ball. It's like a red ball with the wings coming off of it. Almost most people would probably refer to it as like a winged sun disk. And so this is interesting. Nuit definitely corresponds with like the idea of the cosmos or of everything, the totality of everything, right? The feminine sort of womb. And then Hadit would be like the point within that womb. It would be kind of like the dot within the circle, actually, I think is another good metaphor for this. And then right above Hadit, you see what's encompassing Horus the Elder is like this egg. And so egg symbolism is going to come back in the next card in the Thoth deck with the Universe card. And you'll also see egg symbolism, in my opinion, in the Fool card as well, because there's this kind of frame that wraps around the Fool, looks very, very egg-like, and then we'll see that here in the 21st card. The Hebrew letter that corresponds with this card is Shin, which means tooth, and you'll notice that Horus the Younger is actually touching one of his teeth there, right? And so when you look into the esoteric aspect of teeth, it has to do with kind of like grinding things down, which is what our teeth do, right? And so it grinds things down, it processes things so it can kind of move along, you know, in our tract and everything else. The kind of interesting thing that he does here that you don't see in a lot of other cards, in fact, I'm struggling to think of another card where he actually does this, but he actually puts the Hebrew letter in the artwork. So you see down below, there's another Shin down below with those three figures.
Okay. I was wondering about that. That's what I was looking at.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
You know, Shin means tooth, right? You knew that? area? Doesn't
Yeah.
make sense anyway. Oh, okay, I know.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's weird.
And so you have 3 figures in kind of the Yod-like looking flames of Shin, and it looks like they're going through some sort of transformation. And I actually reread what Crowley wrote about it, and it kind of escapes me right now. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff actually going on in this card. Once you start diving into it, and once you kind of have a better understanding of his whole entire framework with how he does everything. But this is the second to last card, in the major arcana. So it's kind of like the final sort of moment right before the grand finale. It's like the final sort of act, or it's the final sort of transformation. It's the final sort of unfurling before everything is kind of complete, or everything is kind of open. And so, like I said, there's a lot of as above, so below symbolism kind of going on. I think it's more obvious, in the Rider-Waite version. And yeah, that's what I have off the top of my head. What do you guys think about this card?
Here, I'll go real quick. There was some things. Mr. E had said something that I've always thought of Nuit possibly being too, which is like the firmament or Milky Way. I mean,
absolutely.
Milk of the stars and all that. For people who may not know, even the Stelae of Revelation, that oh God, was it Rose? I can't remember her name. Crowley's girl at the time pointed out something, and what was it? 666 was even like the exhibit number and everything for it. But it had like Nuit, and he was just mentioning, Hadith in there and the Egyptian stuff. And like that even depicts Nuit in the same way that this card is.
100%. Even Crowley said that that artwork, that this is essentially kind of a condensed version of that in certain ways.
No, I could totally see that. Yeah.
100%. Absolutely.
So I just did want people to know that too. Like it's even on like the Stelae of Revelation that Crowley talks about, and the OTO has in every one of their places. So somebody had mentioned the Milky Way, which I do think that's a possibility. So even the same guy, Mr. E, had even said something about the horseshoe and magnetism. That's actually something I do think is used a lot with horseshoe symbolism, or like symbolism showing the back of a carriage.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like a horseshoe as well, especially with Mormon symbolism to me. When they show the backs of their carriages on like a lot of their pins or logos and stuff, kind of looks like a horseshoe. And I do think, in a sense, a horseshoe is showing magnetism, and that could even be something we're seeing here. I would even go with Lucky Jeans. Their logo, I think, is the same shit.
Well, it's interesting that this is all coming up because part of the symbolism that even Crowley references in his Book of Thoth is that what he's also trying to do was create a kind of like the upper portion of the Libra glyph, so kind of like that half circle sort of thing. And he was saying that he put that in here to allude to the next age, not the one that's just about to come, but the one even after that, which apparently is related to Libra in some way, shape, or form. And so
hence
even
the word Aeon. Okay, that made that connection there that you said that.
There you go. Exactly right. Yeah, totally. So even the Libra glyph, it's interesting because there's a few different opinions about what the glyph represents. And one of them is basically that it's like a setting sun. So it's like the beginning of fall. So like the sun, there's an equilibrium of day and night, at the beginning of Libra season, which is the fall equinox. And so the other idea behind the Libra glyph, though, is that it's actually the contraption that you put on horses or ox before they pull a plow. And so it's kind of like this horseshoe sort of looking thing. And then there's there's 2 components basically that kind of lock in the head of the animal or whatever. And so anyways, just thought I would throw that out there. But there is a subtle sort of Libra thing going on here, which is interesting because I was mentioning this before we got on air. The other name for this card is Judgment. And so when I think of judgment, I think of, the weighing of the souls ritual, right? Being judged kind of in a way. There's a big part of Libra symbolism that actually has to do with judgment. Hence, Lady Justice, the Justice card, corresponding actually with Libra and Lady Justice, who hands out judgments, right, holding the scales, right, of justice. And so there is kind of some really sneaky hidden Libra symbolism going on here that I actually didn't really realize until very, very recently. So there's all of that. But the weighing of the souls ritual, so the idea, right, your heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, right? And if it's heavier than the feather, then you're basically going to be eaten by a monster. If it's lighter than a feather and you've lived lightly, and righteously perhaps, then, it's more favorable for ascension. And here we're dealing with kind of like the final ascension or the final transformation, I guess.
One other thing I wanted to mention real quick, kind of more on the eyeball stuff. I have thought that this is possibly showing like the optic nerve in a sense. And even the way the optic nerves, like once they come out of your eyeballs and go into your head, will cross like that. There's a lot of Egyptians, I think, showing that. So to me, like it's kind of, I would think like kind of where Horus is sitting. Actually, if you look at the optic nerve, it could almost look like a chair, with the way the nerves actually are inside of it. So I do think that sometimes some of these gods sitting on chairs could possibly be like showing them maybe controlling or getting to that point, the optic nerve. And the way that Nuit is, it does very much look like the way your eyeballs start to cross, into your head and stuff. So I do question and do think that there possibly eyeball symbolism is.
Nice. Someone mentioned it in the chat, but yes, the ox yoke. That's the contraption, right? That keeps them harnessed in so they can pull a plow or whatever. I just think it's interesting that it's an ox yoke, and then a yoke being related to eggs as well. It's spelled differently, but it phonetically it sounds the same. Well, here we have that kind of golden egg right there in the middle.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. That's really apparent right there, the cosmic egg.
That even goes back to eyes again, because again, our eyes are yoked. Unless you somehow do something to make them unyoked, which is exactly what I think happens with magic. I think you'll get one pupil bigger, one pupil smaller. They are unyoked. So I could even go there with that as well.
Nice. That's interesting. One of the things I just want to mention real quick too, just because I've always noticed it, and I don't know the symbolism behind it, but the headdress of Horus the Younger, notice how it's different from left to right. That's kind of a curious sort of thing. And then also, I can't imagine that this is an accident. It's completely intentional. But when you look at the testicles of Horus the Younger, notice that one side is red and the other side is that darker color. It's blue. So there's like that red sort of square on one side, but not the other side. So there's definitely this thing going on right now with the young Horus, where it's like showing the two different sides, and in a way it's kind of mirroring what we were saying earlier about Nuit and the bracelets, and kind of the wave versus the kind of like spikes with the other bracelets. So anyways, there's something going on between left and right here that I haven't completely like unpacked or looked into.
That all could be even like you're saying, the top part. Like I would normally assume sometimes, like if that was a headdress, it'd be turned a little bit more to the other way, and then you'd have the snake in the front. Maybe there is showing you difference of angles in here. You're saying that matching the bulls too. Maybe all just showing like a difference of rotation, a change of something. You never know.
Well, also too, just saying in the devil card, there's those two testicles down below, and he's showing the difference between the testicles too, because in one testicle it's like more masculine looking figures, and then including Pan, and then in the other testicle it looks more feminine, the figures within that. So I don't know. So he's highlighted, I just am realizing this, he's highlighted the difference between the left testicle and the right testicle at least twice in the major arcana. So for what that's worth.
Yeah. And then one more quick thing, and then I'm done. I saw some of you guys were talking about ox and oxygen. I hate to go back to the eyeball stuff again, but the cornea looks like desert floor, and it does actually breathe or take in oxygen. So I have wondered, like, technically, if you keep giving, if you had, oxes are known for, like you said, tilling the ground and stuff like that. If you have your oxygen and then you add your tears, you'll get some growth. You know what I'm saying? Water and tilling the ground. So I often wonder, like, is ox even just a form of us being like a slave to our eyeballs open and working?
Well, man, I hate to bring up testicles again, but you know what makes an ox an ox? They're castrated bulls.
Oh.
So they're more easily tamed that way, which is very interesting because when you look into Hebrew and the Kabbalah and the tarot here, right, the first letter that corresponds with the first card of the major arcana, the Fool, is Aleph, which means ox. And when you read about the four faces of God, the tetramorphs, right, the fixed signs, a lot of times instead of it being referenced as a bull, it's referenced specifically as an ox. So anyway, had to point that out. And also we'll get into ox bull symbolism in the final card. The bull is a little different in the universe card than all of the other animals.
Man, we can't get away from those bulls right now.
No, definitely not.
All right. Well, back to you, Megan.
I'm good. I think you guys have covered this one pretty well.
All right. All right, here we go. Judgment card. Okay.
So this one is one of my personal favorite cards. I use it a lot in rituals. So this card, the secret esoteric name is the Spirit of Primal Fire. It's associated with the element of fire, the 8th house, and Pluto, which was Scorpio's original ruler. It's now Mars, but it used to be Pluto, which is all about death and rebirth. And so that's very apparent here on this card, these people being reborn. So it's like healing and awakening, phoenix rising, being reborn, call to action, doing one's true will, kind of rebirthing yourself. And it's like a call to serve, like the greater good, kind of. It like emits a feeling of you're starting anew, trying to do things in service for others, not just yourself. And so it represents the fire element represents activating physical and spiritual energy, because fire can destroy as well as create. It's about forgiving yourself for the judgments you have made in your life for yourself and others. This card is sometimes called the Last Judgment as well. It is the 20th card, so 2 + 0 in numerology, it's 2. So it's about balance and harmony. Subconscious and superconscious kind of coming together, new purpose in life. It also relates to the High Priestess and the Fool card. So the angel, the divine breath or cosmic fire from Gabriel, that's what that represents. The clouds are breaking through boundaries to be reborn again. So it's about the subconscious becoming aware. And when you do that, you gain enlightenment. The trumpet represents vibration and sound. The floating coffins there, they're rectangular and they represent the 3 dimensions. And they also represent limitations and experience. The gray bodies, they're blended together and neutralized, black and white coming together. And gray is the color of wisdom. And then we've got, excuse me 1 second. Okay, so the 7 lines of breath that are coming out there at the end of that trumpet, they represent the 7 notes on the musical scale of vibration. They also relate to the 7 chakras and the 7 stars. The banner with the equal arm cross is also seen on the High Priestess card. And then I wrote, our consciousness is on the verge of blending with universal consciousness. And this is also a card of karma and breaking ties.
Yeah. So like I said, I think I prefer this artwork actually than maybe Crowley's version. Although I definitely respect it. I don't think I mentioned it, by the way. So Crowley's version, that Horus, the younger, it reminds me very similar of the Crowned and Conquering Child. Again, he didn't put it overtly in the Sun card, but I think he maybe put it overtly in the Aeon card. And then, as you said, this card corresponds with fire, right? And so, one of the things when I was just preparing for the show, just a reminder that there is kind of like a baptism by fire or destruction by fire sort of thing going on here too, that I think is kind of interesting.
Yes.
Right. With that elemental correspondence. The thing I think I kind of geek out the most about, like as of late when I see this card, is literally that red cross, and having a new understanding and a new appreciation for that red cross and what it represents. And so from my kind of new perspective of things, according to people like Kenneth Grant and other occultists, the cross really goes back to crossing the threshold. It goes back to crossing over, crossing the abyss, going to the other side. And it's interesting because the number 5 relates to this. The number 5 being related to the golden mean and golden spiral and, this golden ratio sort of thing. It fits nicely within a 5-pointed star. And so the mathematics behind the 5-pointed star, I've said before, but it's really like the 5-pointed star and the number 5 and all of the sacred geometry that kind of comes along with it. It is like this sort of, what's the word that I tend to use? It's in between spirit and matter. So it's in between the physical world and the spiritual etheric world. And so that's why there's a lot of really, really transcendental stuff that tends to come along with the 5-pointed star. Obviously, we have 5 fingers, 5 main appendages, all that kind of stuff. Even the Hierophant, like he's looked at as being a bridge between, the people here on earth and like the gods or the heavens or whatever. And so the number 5 is kind of like this threshold sort of number, I would say. It kind of represents crossing the abyss. And even the ancient Egyptians, their underworld was the duat, and the symbol that they used for the duat was the 5-pointed star. And so I bring all of this up because when you're talking about the cross, it's very obvious that there's 4 arms, and it's very obvious that there's 4 quadrants, but you have to acknowledge the 5th point in the middle. You have to acknowledge its sacred center. And so when I see the cross now, I just think about all of this symbolism. Again, crossing over, the crossroads too, right? We're kind of at a crossroads here in this plane of reality. And what do you know? What's happening here, actually? It's like the entities, from above are meeting, the beings down below. So once again, this as above, so below thing is very, very obvious, and they're merging in the middle, kind of at that crossroads. So I think that's kind of what this cross represents personally, is this crossing over sort of business. So just thought I would point that out.
Yes, totally agree with that.
Nice.
Something you mentioned before with the sun, you mentioned gas. And I was going to go into something on that, but I'm not going to go back. But, I kind of do have like fire symbolism here. And before you were talking about gas, and now we're cooking with the gas we just had before. Like, is that what's going on here?
Yes. Yes.
And then even just the difference between the Crowleys and this, I find almost in one way completely different. You have Horus pointing to his tooth, but could also be the sign of silence. And you got this person making as much noise as they can.
Oh, right. That's a good one, dude. I like that that connection there for sure.
And with the cross, that's also how your pupil gets pulled open, is that way in the 4 directions. And so I would even wonder, like, if that is even anything to do with it, then what are we seeing with the trumpet? Is that something completely different now?
When the judgment card comes up for me personally in readings, I always get this sense that it's almost like a wake-up call. And so, that I think is kind of the implication in that it's a wake-up call from your higher self. And so some people might refer to this as your holy guardian angel or something along those lines. But it's a higher aspect of yourself kind of giving a wake-up call to a lower aspect of self, I guess you can say.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that's one way I look at it.
Megan, you have anything else that you want?
No, I'm good. I'm good on that.
Yeah, I think that's really the only stuff I was gonna add to it. You know, I don't want to go too much into the eye stuff, but I even think like possibly the ice wall, whatever that's supposed to be in the background, that could be like the white part of your eye.
Mm.
Your sclera.
If you were of a white and blonde eyes, you know this. I mean, white and blue eyes, you would have that going on. You know, your iris would be blue and the sclera would be white. You know, and that is changing when the pupil changes as well.
People
Interesting.
that I'm sorry,
No, good.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but people with blue eyes, their genetics are more northern, like, you know, Viking territory, old Germania. So, and it's meant to help them with snow blindness. So that's why it evolved to be blue. So your DNA, if you have blue eyes, your DNA is northern, more Viking-like, because of snow blindness. It helps you see better in the snow. People with brown eyes, we see better in the sunlight because of the way the eye color absorbs.
Well, it's really interesting you say that, because I was going to bring up symbolism that's kind of related.
Cool. Okay.
To that, because you know the cross as well, right? One of the things I think about is the 4 cardinal directions, right? So when you're thinking about the 4 cardinal directions under my cosmology, you know, when I think of the center point of this place, I put it at the north. You know, and then here you have this ice wall, right? So the Arctic, and you're talking about northern peoples, right? So there's a lot of stuff to be said about that. But even that trumpet, you know, flute symbolism. Whenever I see a flute, or I see kind of a wind instrument like this, and it's just long and it's just one sort of shaft or whatever, it's very, very phallic. And people who have followed my work know that whenever I see a symbol like this, I always attribute it to the world axis, you know? And so that ice wall sort of behind them, it kind of represents almost like the final sort of like threshold, because we're about to enter into the universe card or the world card or whatever. So I do see kind of like subtle northern polar symbolism, basically, with that trumpet, with the cross, with the ice wall, you know, and then some of the stuff you just mentioned right now kind of reminds me of that, because they're very obviously supposed to be blonde people, you know. One of the things that I would love to know is, like, what did the original Rider-Waite version look like? You know, like, were those trees in the background, were they colored in, were they green, you know? Are they always blonde? Do they have different colored hair? Sometimes these newer reproductions, you know, the color kind of shifts a little bit, or something's not completely filled in the way it should be, or what have you. But anyway,
that kind of reminds me of like the court cards. They, back in the day, like their original meanings, they actually represented actual people, and most of them, you know, you don't have those combinations today. So that meaning, those meanings of them representing actual people that look that way in the card, we don't use that anymore because it's antiquated. So
yeah. Totally. So cool card. I think it's one of the more interesting ones in the whole Major Arcana, actually.
Yep. It's one of my favorites.
I thought that was really interesting discussion on it. It was good. And here we have the universe.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So the universe card, obviously another dex, generally known as the world card. So Crowley definitely had a more expansive sort of idea in mind with this. It's interesting, actually. This version is showing you the Hebrew letter correspondence and the planetary correspondence, when normally it's actually not seen. Like, I have a version right here, and there's no correspondence down below. So I've always thought that was kind of curious, personally, of like, why do some of the cards not have it? The Aeon is another card that doesn't have any sort of correspondence down below. But anyway, so what you see here, it's kind of a traditional sort of layout in a way, but he obviously does his own thing here. So you see the 4 faces of God, the 4 fixed signs in the corners, but they're all spewing water. So this really gets into the nature of, in my opinion, the idea that there's waters above and waters below, right? And so you can get into firmament symbolism with all of that, and the fact that Nuit is obviously blue. There's lots of watery symbolism that basically is very much connected to the heavens or connected to the spirit realm, right? And so to me, what I kind of see a little bit is that he's actually playing with the frame of the artwork, and it reminds me very much of an ark or a ship, basically. And so I get this sort of nautical, oceanic sort of thing going on here, almost like a ship-like sort of thing, which is basically a vessel, which a seed is also a vessel, which that also looks like, right? And so it looks like a seed. It kind of looks like an egg. It looks like a yoni, right? It's a Vesca Pisces sort of thing. And here, seemingly everything is kind of contained within it, actually. There's lots of really very subtle but pretty slick things going on here. So as an example, one of the things that I think a lot of people, unless you've read the Book of Thoth, probably don't know about, but you see that little pyramid thing down below? That is actually the structure of the periodic table of elements when Crowley created this deck. So he's actually alluding to all of the elements that were discovered at the time. And there's a hierarchy with the elements based on the atomic number and how many neutrons and protons and stuff like that, or electrons that it has. And so that's what he's showing you. He's showing you, I believe he called it the House of Matter, essentially, right? And so he's showing you all of the elements there. Pretty appropriate given the fact that it's the universe card. Mm-hmm. He's also showing you the it kind of looks like a almost like a circular saw blade, right? The little teeth kind of going around the whole entire frame there. And what he's showing you is that there's actually 72 teeth there. And so this gets into I believe they're called the quinaries. So it's literally what we talked about earlier about the decans. So the decans are 10 degrees each sign. Mm-hmm. There's another system where they acknowledge the every 5 degrees. So there's 72 of those around the whole entire zodiac wheel. So that means that there's 6 per sign, right? So the number 72, there's 72 Goetia. There's 72 angels, and they all, in my opinion, it seems like they all kind of correspond with the exact same system. And what you're doing is you're basically taking the circle, the 360 degrees of the circle, and if you just divide it by 5, it's 72. And so that's kind of what you're seeing here is the stuff related to all of those different sort of systems. The name for the angelic system was 72. It's escaping me. It's like Hebrew.
The Shemot Barash.
Yes, thank you.
The 72 angelic and 72 goetic entities of the Shemot Barash.
You got it. Yeah, exactly.
Or the Shemop for short. Occultists call it Shemop for short.
I should remember that. Yeah, that's easier. So that's what he's acknowledging right there, right? And I have to say, I think I have not done this. I have not read about this anywhere. But if he's acknowledging every 5th degree of the night sky, essentially, of the zodiac wheel, is he actually putting in real stars in that grid, right? Because there's stars that are placed out in the grid here, and I'm just like, they're very strategically placed too, in my opinion. I don't think that they would just willy-nilly, obviously, just put stars wherever. And so my guess would be that there's probably a start. You could probably find somewhere the beginning of the year, and then kind of see it all the way through. So just kind of throwing that out there. I might maybe try and do that.
Is it the zodiac belt?
I was just thinking that, yeah, could that be the zodiac signs?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which has been referred to as the girdle of the goddess, basically the great goddess, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's probably something to be said about all of that. And speaking of the goddess, by the way, she is, and I think it's more obvious in the Rider-Waite version, but this is the Virgin. This is the Queen of Heaven. This is Virgo, right? The Eternal Virgin. And so she's the Queen of Heaven, but she's also the Queen of Earth. In my opinion, a lot of goddesses, perhaps all goddesses, they all go back to the original great goddess. That's how I personally perceive it. So this woman here is the same woman in the Lust card, right? I also believe, even though she's purple, it's probably the same woman in the Star card. So he has this way of depicting these women where they almost kind of look, they're almost like kind of cartoony, but they're all just solid colored, usually yellow, golden, and then in the Star card, she's purple. But I'm inclined to think essentially it's sort of the same woman. And so notice too that the cow or the ox, the bull, he has very swirly eyes, right? None of the other figures have swirly eyes like that. And in my opinion, this kind of relates to the idea that the Hebrew letter that corresponds with this card is Tau. So Tau, Tau, as in Taurus, right? And so it's possible. My kind of like thing is that I think we probably live in a gigantic toroidal field, a gigantic torus field, right? There's this idea that the whole entire universe, right, was once referred to as the bull of heaven, right? And so bull symbolism, super, super, super deep. From what I see and what I gather is actually there's a few things that connect this card with the full card, with Crowley's version of the full card. One is that they're both in an egg-like sort of thing, right? Implying kind of the totality of sort of everything, I guess, or nothing as well. I think that maybe is kind of the implication with the full card. But either way, the egg or the zero even kind of can imply everything and nothing at the exact same time. Like I said earlier, the full card corresponds with Aleph, which is the ox, and then it ends with Tau, which means cross. But there's also a Tau cross. And so the cross symbolism is absolutely here in that we have the fixed signs. So we have the fixed cross literally in the corners, right?
Yeah.
And so one of my things is that I think that the tarot begins and ends with bull symbolism, you know, and that it's kind of one of the things that kind of completes the whole entire cycle or the whole entire system from beginning to end, you know. And so you can really, really unload on that and unpack that for a long time because there's a lot to be said about the nature of the bull and why it's so important. And all of the different cultures that have stories related to the cow and the bull and all this other kind of stuff. But what I was going to say is that we have the fixed cross being represented in the corners. Once again, the four faces of God, the tetramorphs, whatever you want to call them. All of the constellations in the heavens revolve around one star. It's the North Star. Right. So all of the constellations revolve around one star. So symbolically, to me, in my opinion, if she's in the middle of all of this, she is the northern goddess. And so I tend to see a lot of goddess symbolism in the northern sky now. And she is very, very much related to the serpent. So when you see the serpent around a tree or around a pole or around the Tau cross, that's another thing that you can see out there, or around a cross or whatever. I tend to think of this idea of a world serpent being wrapped around, you know, the world axis or whatever. And she has a very, very close relationship with the serpent. So anyways, so those are a few things off the top of my head. I'm going to look at my notes, but you guys can fill me in on what you guys think real quick.
You can go ahead, Ming.
I just wanted to just say one thing. So this looks like a net to me that's around that we were talking about it being like a zodiac belt.
Yes.
It just reminds me of Indra's net.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was it's like this is like a final culmination of everything, and then she's wrapped in the net, and so she's accomplished something huge. This is the last one in the major arcana, so. That's really the only thing I wanted to say about this here, because I have quite a bit to say about the Rider Waite, so I don't want to like
yeah.
Yeah.
Then you'll have nothing to say when we pull up your card. Yeah, I get it. I have a lot of weird random things to add to this.
Oh, dude, your eye symbolism is on full display here.
Yes, it is. I mean, hello.
I mean...
No, it's even tying in Twin Peaks, so that like makes it even weirder. But with this card, we saw the sun recently. We just covered the sun and then to Judgment. And again, we were talking about the sun and the sunflower with spirals. So I do see like the gold again, which would go along with the sun and then spiraling multiple ways at that one part. I guess at the end of the snake and then even like by her head kind of, So I'm questioning if that is like still showing sun or sunlight or something, some sort of solar energy. And our eyes do take solar energy or the sunlight and convert it into electricity in our optic nerve. All that stuff starts to happen.
Very interesting.
in
Very
our,
interesting.
in our eyes, I know you would have to multiply this to get it, but we do have we have about 120 million rods, and then we have about 6 million cones. If you were to multiply those together, you get 720. Again, you'd have 72. Now, the reason I'm even entertaining this is because there's a Twin Peaks. It's an outtake. You can find it by looking up Twin Peaks above the convenience store. It was one of his most weirdest things. That's probably why it was taken out. I do think there's a lot of eyeball and occult symbolism in there. But at the beginning of it, it starts off with hearing like this tone, and then it shows you going down a telephone pole, and it has the number 6 on it, which I do think was for Tiferet. And then like above it is 720 burnt into the wood or carved into the wood. So I wouldn't even have probably entertained like the sun of the 720 and all this if all that Twin Peaks didn't pop into my head right now. And not to go on Twin Peaks again, but in season 3, there is a point where I think the guy's called the fireman. It's during like a black and white scene. This guy, the old tall giant dude, floats up to the ceiling, and all this gold starts coming out and like spreading out into the air. And then like this little orb comes down, and this lady takes it and like kind of puts it into, it almost looked like a brass instrument with 2 or 3 holes in it, bent just like that snake. And then the arm turned and then dropped that orb into like, it looked like a screen of like a black and white earth, as if we were looking at it from space, in black and white. And then the orb turns to silver and then floats down to earth. Like, to me, the contraption that brought that golden orb and dropped it into the scene looks just like this thing too.
Wow.
So
Nice.
very weird. That's why I said it was weird and random, but like that's what I saw in this card. A whole bunch of occult Twin Peaks stuff and eyeballs.
It's what I'm here for, dude. The weird and random. So it's all good with me. Just want to mention too that the snake is starting to make its sort of trajectory around the 72 sort of wheel that we talked about, 72 pointed wheel. And so the serpent, from what I've gathered over the years, is that a lot of ancient old serpent symbolism, first off, the serpent is probably the most heavily encoded animal in the animal kingdom. It can mean everything, honestly. It's supremely evil, supremely good, wise, all of these different types of things, feminine, masculine, etc., etc. There's a few animals out there where like the symbolic value of them is like, you can literally write multiple books just on how they've been used and perceived and everything else. The serpent has been heavily feared and revered by many, many, many different groups. And so woman and serpent and woman and feline and woman and dragon, I would say, there's lots of myths that relate these figures together. And I've mentioned it before. I know I mentioned it during the strength card episode, but the overlapping symbolism with cat, serpent, and dragon, once it's pointed out and once you're kind of like paying attention, you can't unsee it, basically. I did a whole video breakdown about the symbolic sort of aspects of all that stuff. But the serpent, there's a lot of serpentine symbolism that is expressed with the serpent encompassing the totality of everything. So it's almost like a universal or galactic serpent that wraps around everything, the entirety of the cosmic egg, if you will, or the Taurus field. There's a lot of serpent symbolism too that wraps it around kind of the sacred center of the plane or of the domain that you kind of live within. So there's a lot of symbolism about the serpent wrapping around the world tree, the central world tree, or the central mountain, or the central sort of rock or whatever. And so serpent symbolism is both inner and outer. There's many examples of both being expressed, wrapping around everything, but also wrapping around the central pole, if you will. So I just think it's kind of interesting that it's kind of starting, its path along that wheel there, and wanted to point that out. Yet it's emanating from this yoni sort of eye thing. And I think what she's holding is, if I'm not mistaken, it's supposed to be a black crescent moon. and that's being expressed from the eye, and then the serpent is also obviously coming from that eye as well. And so she's kind of like uniting these two things together, which to me, even still, like there's a few things that when I look at this card, it's not extremely obvious to me what's going on, including even that shape in the background. What Crowley said about that was something along the lines of it is kind of like it's like the Kabbalistic system, and it's this planetary system idea, and it's all of these different sort of systems together kind of whirling in this sort of like mass, creating this weird shape behind her. So I didn't quite understand it, to be honest, and I don't know if I kind of see that personally. And then also too, there's like this light square behind her head, and then her hair is kind of doing something very interesting. It's creating this spirally sort of thing. And so there's still a few things in this card, like I said, I'm not entirely clear about. But if people in the comments obviously have insights regarding any of that stuff, I'd love to know.
One other thing I was going to add, I see even somebody saying something about like the power over darkness and stuff. Even if you were to consider where New Wheat is, I mean, one, she is a little bit darker, but two, like even in the back of the eyeball, I mean, you're starting to get the darker colors and everything. So I do question if that all has something to do with it. Again, that could be the change of energy, and where it was dark, it isn't anymore.
Right. I just have to say,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. Just want to mention the fact that when you see the Virgin Mary, it's not uncommon to see the Virgin Mary with serpent and with a crescent moon as well. And so I put a lot of stock into the fact that when you're talking about any virgin goddess, you're actually talking about a northern goddess, essentially. And I've put out videos about her and her relating to the pillar, which is the world axis, and her relating to the lion and the snake. So it kind of lines up with that, because what you're going to see a lot of times is you're going to see the Virgin Mary. She's going to be in a Vesca Pisces, and she's going to be standing on top of a serpent holding Christ, and also frequently standing on top of a crescent moon. And so here we have like most of that symbolism here.
Yeah. Oh, I guess we'll go on to the next. Oh, the only other thing I was going to mention, it was that again, just to go along with this card with the Twin Peaks that I mentioned before with the 720 and the 6, there was a point in that part that was taken out. A guy like lifts like looks like a cane in his hand or something. He lifts it off the ground and puts it back down and says animal life. And that's all he said. So again, like we're looking at animals here too. So
I was trying to look up how many elements were in the periodic table in 1944 when this thought deck was published, because I was trying to figure out how many elements, but I can't find anything right now. So
he actually put it in his book. It's 92.
92.
Just shy of 93. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. That's what I was trying to get at. Like I was trying to see if there was a connection there, and apparently there is.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, guys. So I've got a lot of info on this one, because this one is the culmination. So anytime you are starting to practice high magic, ceremonial magic, the first thing that you learn to do is study the tarot and work with the tarot. You're supposed to keep a diary and learn all this stuff. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. If you guys are wanting to learn, to practice, expect to work a lot with the tarot. It's an integral part of your practice. It's something that you use all the time. So it's highly worth it if you know the information. It'll make it easier on you. Okay, so the secret esoteric name for this one is the Great One of Night and Time. This card represents limitations and hard lessons. It is the element of earth, associated with Saturn, Capricorn, the 10th house of career and status. So this card is about transformation, perfect balance, self-discovery, and transformation. This is the final archetype to emerge of all the keys. So in the occult world, we call the major arcanas keys, and attain full spiritual enlightenment. So this is the completion stage, the merging of all of the 22 into one. And what I love about this one is it represents the culmination of the great work. It represents mastery, The Philosopher's Stone, self-actualization and accomplishment, change of consciousness and character, as all the 22 are merged, and it represents the loss of ego, the state of nirvana. It's the number 21, so 2 + 1 = 3, which harkens back to the Empress card. It's also related to the Hangman because of her crossed legs. The world is the final result of the action taken in the Hanged Man. So the ellipsis or the wreath is the connection of as above, so below. It also represents the womb. Her wands represent fire of the divine inspiration. They are double terminated, so they receive and put out energy. It also represents the 2 pillars of polarity on the tree of life. The 4 Lamasu, the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac represent the 4 elements. These also represent the 4 tools on the magician's altar. The banner represents consciousness and rhythm. The dancer is the middle pillar on the tree of life. It represents a union of consciousness, victory, paradise regained. Reorganization and integration are the main 2 words for this card. So this card represents the final stage of alchemy, which is coagulation and a crystallization into gold. It is a solidified mode of perfection. This card is the master of all archetypes. It represents the sacred center of becoming one. It's all about manifestation, expansion, liberation, self-discipline, balance and flow, and restriction. And then I wrote ipsissimus in quotes, the highest level of attainment on the spiritual path. And we've got, so the 4 keys that kind of summarize the whole journey, which is like the culmination of this card, is the Fool, the Wheel of Fortune, the Justice card, and the World card. So that's what I have for this one. I know that was a bit long-winded, guys, but this one is like the culmination of the great work. So there's a lot of information in this card itself. So I'll let one of you guys go next.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I appreciate all of that. I do. I it's interesting that this is kind of the theme for this last one, because I don't feel like I felt that strongly about this earlier on in other episodes, but I kind of strongly prefer the Rider-Waite version of these cards than the Crowley version. Because when I see this, it's more direct and it's simpler and all this other stuff, as much as I appreciate all the things he was trying to go for. But as an example, we have the Golden Serpent in the last card, right? In the Crowley version. The serpent's still here. It's that ribbon. It's that ribbon wrapped around her, right?
Yes.
And so it's serpentine in nature. And you said it, but she represents the middle pillar. That those 2 batons represent Boaz Jacquin. She's the middle pillar. She's the middle path, which essentially means that she is the central pillar. She is the world axis. And so you have that serpent wrapping around the world axis the same way you're going to see the serpent wrapping around the world tree, right? It's the same symbolism. And I'm even more convinced that that's the symbolism because she's standing on 1 foot. 1 foot symbolism, standing on 1 leg, is another symbol of the world axis, which is why you oftentimes see Hermes Mercury standing on 1 foot. And so that's why you see him standing on 1 foot in the Magician card, right? In Crowley's version of the Magician card. He's standing on 1 foot and there's that pole right behind him, because Mercury Hermes is perhaps the most potent deity that relates to the world axis in actuality. And so 1-legged symbolism absolutely speaks to this for sure. So she is the central pillar. It's becoming more clear to me when I see a lot of this artwork and whatever. And the last presentation I did, if people want more information on some of this stuff, check out my Lion and Virgin presentation. So she is the world axis unto herself. I love the fact that she has the batons. I love the fact that there is this implied movement going on. You know, it speaks to being in harmony with the rhythms of the universe, right? I think of like the beat of the universe. I think of our heartbeat, right? And so I think of the universe verse. I think of music. I think of like a record playing, right? I think of, an album or the Akashic record. I sometimes think of the Akashic record as being like a circular sort of disc, right? And so, and we're all kind of playing our part in this record actually, playing. So I just wanted to point out some of that symbolism because to me, it's very clear kind of what's being alluded to here. And you said it, she's the master of all archetypes or something along those lines, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. In my opinion, the occult world, the further you go into the symbolism, the rituals, these different like kind of lodge systems and mystery schools and whatever, it goes back to the sacred feminine. It all goes back to the primordial mother, the dark mother, if you will. To me, that is kind of like where everything sort of stems from. And so it would make a lot of sense that you're going to have a nude woman be on the world card and not a man, So it's beautiful stuff.
Yep.
Very well said. I really don't have anything else to add to this that I really didn't see in the last card because I think some of it still applies. I do sometimes wonder if like the feminine, who would kind of technically maybe go along with even the the bright and dark spot in your eyeball, but I do question if the female, because of the way that the hyaloid canal changes, it can go from straight to an S. So sometimes I wonder if that's like showing you the change in the form. And around your lens, you'd have the Zaniels of Zin, which very much kind of looks like that green stuff going around it. I could be wrong. If we're talking about eyes, that even could be the green cones in our eyes to begin with, too. But I don't think there's really anything else I have to say on this than the last one.
Yeah, no worries. The last thing I will say is its relationship to Saturn. Right. So Saturn, under the traditional planetary system, it was the furthest planet out. It was slow and lumbering, and it takes 27 or 28 years or whatever to make one full rotation or one full cycle, which is in contrast to Mercury, which is 88 days. So that's a large stretch of time, right? Saturn, Father Time, Kronos, all of this stuff. So Saturn is like the end of the line under that system, right? So that's what we're talking about here with this card. So the Saturnian correspondence with this card, very, very, very appropriate for a lot of reasons. And I'm inclined to kind of think, actually, that there's a lot of symbols, there's a lot of signs and things like that in today's world, we look at as being more masculine. But I have a strong hunch and suspicion, and there is evidence to suggest all this stuff, that a lot of symbolism that we consider to be highly masculine was feminine back in the day. And I think there's something to be said about Saturn and Saturn's relationship with the crone, and the Saturnian energy actually being kind of feminine in nature, making a lot of sense. I mean, I see both sides, right? But this card kind of, I think, speaks to that a little bit.
Agreed.
I guess that concludes the Major Arcana series. There we go. Finally,
Yep, we got it.
And I had an amazing time doing it. Thank you both so much for that experience.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, you got it, man.
And I guess to wrap it up, again, I know people have probably heard it 20 times already, but Megan, let everybody know where they can find you.
So 7 Degrees of Wisdom on Instagram and Facebook. I have TikTok and YouTube accounts, but I don't have anything up on them yet. I will. I'm sure Nick and Mara will let you guys know when I get that going. If you're interested I do tarot lessons, I do consultations, spiritual consultations, paranormal consultations, and I have a number of different occult subject classes that I teach too. So everything I can do in person, I can also do online. So if you guys want to get a hold of me through that medium and set something up, be more than happy to help you.
I'll get you a link tree after the show.
Okay.
And Mario, let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, you got it. So once again, symbolicstudies.com. It's probably the easiest way to find all my stuff.
Awesome. And thank you, everybody who jumped in on the chat as well. We had a bunch of people in there dropping a lot of stuff. I really appreciate that. There was a couple of great comments in there. I mean, a lot of them are great. I just wasn't going to read all of them off. We'd be here forever. But thank you all for that. There's a lot of stuff I even learn in the comments. So I appreciate people dropping stuff. I hope people that may come to watch it check out the comments. There's always good info in there as well. And that is the end of the tarot series, and that is the end of another Occult Rejects. Until the next one, everybody be well. Later.